What's the most disturbing realization you've come to? Story 1. That the text you sent to that girl might come off as douchey. Maybe you should send another text to clear up the potential misunderstanding. Oh God. You made it worse. Story 2. My whole life I've always felt like I was searching for something, or meant to do great things and just haven't found that something. I'm slowly starting to realize that there is a very good possibility that this may never be the case. I'm not sure how I feel about it either. It's all about perspective. If your scope is too big, you might end up feeling like a failure. But if you keep your perspective a little more realistic, then you might find that you're doing great things. I'm going through the same thing. And it's a crappy realization when you start to understand what you truly are and aren't capable of. You don't have as much money as you thought you would. Your athletic skills are dwindling. You've never even attempted to write that novel because there's not enough time in the day. Sometimes I'm not sure how I feel about it all. But I try to keep my perspective realistic so that it doesn't bog me down. I can do great things for my family or small community. Story 3. My 3 brothers' birthdays are all within a 3-week range. One day I did the math and subtracted 9 months and realized the epicenter of their birthdays was 9 months and 2 days after Dad's birthday. Story 4. Every time you hear about someone escaping from captivity after years of abuse, I realize there are still people being held that we don't know about and may never know about. Recently saw room and rewatched 10 Cloverfield Lane, and after reading about the Toy Box murders, I always think about who might still be out there. Story 5. I read a book that blew my mind. The main character goes crazy when he realizes no one really knows him. The gist is that the person you think of as yourself exists only for you, and even you don't really know who that is. Every person you meet, have a relationship with, or make eye contact on the street with, creates a version of you in their heads. You're not the same person to your mom, your dad, your siblings than you are to your coworkers, your neighbors, or your friends. There are 1,000 different versions of yourself out there in people's minds. A you exists in each version, and yet your you yourself isn't really a someone at all. From Ano, Nessuno Centomila by Luigi Pirandello. Story 6. As a young teenager celebrating New Year with all the extended family, I noticed my great-grandfather celebrating with everyone else. It dawned on me that one day it might be me in his shoes, celebrating with my family. Yet virtually everyone's celebrating with me, and that future are total strangers to me now. And almost everyone I know and love around me now will be strangers, or distant memories to those people I don't know yet, whom I will call family. Story 7. From the very first time I met my sister, when I was got to hold her when she came home from the hospital, I knew I had an ally, a co-conspirator against the United Parent Front. Whatever else came up, when it came down to it, we had each other's backs. I mean, sure, we had our tiffs, what siblings don't? But she was the most caring, loving person I have ever known. She would do almost anything for me if I really needed it, even if I didn't realize I needed it. Almost anything. I needed her to not kill herself. In the end, that was the one thing she could not do. That in turn almost killed me. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to live through. But I have lived through that. I have, for the most part, learned to cope. What disturbs me now is those future plans we had which now will never be. For example, there's a statue in my parents' library my father had made for my mother's birthday when my sister was 4 and I 6. My father's sister and I modeled a few times over the course of a month before my mother's birthday. And it was really difficult for us to keep the secret at that age, but we did. The sculptor used photos of my mom for her part, despite all the effort that went into it. It's really an ugly sculpture, but we can't really get rid of it because of the memories. My sister and I always joked that when my parents both died, we'd have to decide who had to keep the sculpture. We'd then gift it back and forth to each other in funny or discreet ways. Talking about that plan for that ugly sculpture could always make us smile. Now that ugly sculpture will be all mine. I won't be able to give it to my sister or sneak it into our house, but I can't get rid of it because of the memories. That thought, among many of its kind, is one of my most disturbing. I will never get to attend her wedding nor she mine. I will never be an uncle to her children nor she an aunt to mine. All those future plans. Some I knew and some I still realize year on year that I think always expected. None will be. There are a few things so disturbing. Story 8. My parents divorced when I was 5. It was nasty and apparently I was a shitty kid after that. Although I really don't remember ever feeling like I was doing anything wrong, and when I look back, I still don't understand why I was perceived so badly. Anyways, I used to spend a month on my aunt and uncle's farm every summer, and for a month a year I felt like I was part of a real loving family, and those were the happiest days of my childhood. Until one summer, I was probably 7 or 8. They'd come to pick up me and my sisters, and I accidentally overheard my dad arguing with them, begging them to take me. They refused. Everyone loaded into the car and I cried as they pulled away. My dad tried to explain that he decided I should stay, so we could spend some one-on-one time together. But my dad worked a lot, so I spent the next month basically alone in an empty house. That's when I realized I was never going to have the family I wanted. Story 9. The amount of wealth inequality in this world, more importantly, how the rich can just give an insignificant amount of money to the poor and completely change poor people's lives. And still not many do it. I visited a poor rural government school in India. Most kids there are from extremely poor backgrounds. The government gives free lunch to the kids in school, and this is an incentive for these kids to stay in school. When I went, I realized these kids did not have plates because the government did not pay for that, and expected people to bring their own. Almost half of the kids could not do that, so they would wait for the other half to finish eating, and then use their plates. This broke my heart, so I offered to buy every kid in the school plates for lunch. It cost me $100 to buy plates for 200 kids next afternoon. I could see that all the kids suddenly felt like they had the biggest luxury in the world, have their own plates for food. Each kid could not stop smiling and treated their plates like the most valuable possession they had. I will never forget that. I was thinking to myself, these kids did not ask to be born to a poor family in a third world country. Sometimes the world is just not fair. I wish rich people realize how lucky they were, and would do more to reduce suffering of others not as lucky as them. Story 10. There was a post in Shower Thoughts a week or two ago, where the op said something about how he thought we should be able to just turn off our phones and disconnect from social media, etc. for a couple days, if we wanted to, without having to feel weird about it or explain ourselves to anyone. It kind of effed me up because I realized I probably could do just that, and no one would even notice. In fact, it would take a lot longer than a couple days before anyone noticed. Story 11. You never know the last time that you're going to do something until the moment has long passed. You don't know when the last time you'll carry your child in your arms, the last time you'll see a once close friend, the last time you'll play a game. All of these and much more until you look back and realize that you haven't done it since, and most likely never will. Story 12. That I've probably thrown away enough decent food in my life to eat for a few months straight, and then realizing that the same goes for almost everyone who has access to a stable supply of food. Think of all the pigs and cows and chickens that have been slaughtered and simply just thrown away, or the crops harvested and cleaned and packaged just to end up in a landfill. Story 13. The fragility of my family. My dad is a depressed alcoholic who pushed himself too hard, and my mom is a 55-year-old lung cancer survivor who had to go on oxygen full time. A couple years ago, my dad is the sole source of income with the exception that I pay a small amount in rent. People ask why I haven't moved out yet, and I usually say it's because I don't know what I want in life. But really it's because I'm waiting for it to fall apart. If my dad dies first, my mom has no one to support her. If my mom dies first, I'm pretty convinced my dad would kill himself in a week. 2 days ago I woke up to him in our hallway on the floor, white as a sheet, out of breath and speaking incoherently. He was checked into the hospital and it turns out he was taking double doses of his anticoagulant. He hit his thigh on something and that turned into a hematoma that takes up both thighs and his groin. He was bleeding in his stomach and was extremely dehydrated. Yesterday he became combative because of alcohol withdrawal. I'm afraid that this is the end, but the rest of my family doesn't seem to realize just how serious it is. I doubt anyone will see this, as I am so late to the party, but it felt good to get off my chest anyways. Story 14. When I was a freshman in high school, a random guy messaged me on Facebook saying he just moved to the area and was about to attend my school. He said he wanted to make friends. I believed him because I was really naive. He told me he wanted to meet up with me after school, so I told him I'd meet him. The time came and he messaged me saying he was there with his car, and I got a very strong gut feeling that this was a bad idea. I stood him up and hid in a classroom. A few days later I gave an excuse for standing him up and asked when he was enrolling. He didn't give me a straight answer. I thought it was strange. I was thinking about random things 2 years later when I remembered hiding out in that classroom. I realized that the dude was a liar and was planning to abduct me. I almost started crying right then. I'm so glad I had enough sense to at least trust my gut. Story 15. That in the last decade I ceased to be the person I was, and became the sort of person I despised. It happened right under my nose, and I didn't notice until it was already done. I used to hate the types of people who spent time worrying about whether they had enough stuff, enough friends, enough money. People who wasted time putting on masks. And as I entered the professional world, I slowly became that guy. The one who worried if he had a respectable enough apartment, enough friends. I started worshipping brands and giving into advertising to fill some sort of hole in my soul. I put on a mask, and I wondered why I was miserable. It's odd waking up one day and realizing that the person you've become through sheer force of habit is the one who's been stabbing you in the back for years.